Cassie Ventura on the witness stand for a fourth day in the federal criminal trial against hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs. The defense continuing cross-examination this morning, confronting her with dozens of her own messages, many explicit, hoping to convince the jury she was an eager sexual partner who matched Combs' desires. "I'm always ready to freak off," one message said. That Ventura had a choice and that she chose to participate in those sexual encounters.
She's being asked specifically about the drug use.
She is clearly excited about freak off.
Ventura's attorney is optimistic outside of court.
Doing great. I said she was ready, and I think she's demonstrating that. The facts are the facts, the texts are the texts, and I think that the evidence will be clear as the case goes on and Cassie's testimony goes on, and we'll see what the jury does.
The courtroom went from tense to explosive. The second Cassie's private messages were read out loud, and Diddy lost it. Was it fear, regret, or something way darker? Tell me what you think triggered that meltdown. I'm replying to every comment, so let's break this down together.
Combs allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, which he called freak-offs, and he often electronically recorded them. The freak-offs sometimes lasted days at a time.
Cassie was into the freak-offs herself and was like a willing participant and was into all the freaky stuff, and essentially that was the crux of what they were trying to do yesterday.
And do you think they proved that or not?
I mean, there's texts like that from 2009, "I'm always ready to freak off." There was some other texts where she was referencing like hitting him up about the FOs, is what they were referring to him. To me, like, yes, this doesn't look good, but at the same time, I think the timeline is crucial here. And these are texts from 2009, man. That was when they were first getting in the relationship. She was young. Obviously, they were in the honeymoon stage, and she was stoked to like, oh my God, I'm with Diddy. I'm living this lavish lifestyle. Of course, she's going to be saying things that she knows will curry favor with him to keep it going.
Where she is entertaining other people in the bedroom. He enjoyed having the freak offs.
And finally, we'll talk about Justin Bieber, because he is finally addressing the Diddy stuff. There's been long speculation that somehow he's involved.
Surprised it took so long to address.
Well, he's clearing that up now. And also we'll talk about how people are scared for Justin Bieber because they think he's in a cult. They have to have it.
By the end of today, Cassie will be done. So they have all day today to ask her whatever they want to ask her.
Because obviously she's about to pop. And that's like...
Which is totally understandable.
So if she did pop, if she did give birth, let's say the technical term, over the weekend, you know what would happen then, Devin?
I don't.
Mistrial, baby.
Why do you say that? What?
Because she's due back on the stand to give testimony. And if she can't give testimony anymore...
No, she's giving testimony today.
I know. I was saying, what if...
Oh, like she gave birth and then
that's why. That's the
delayed.
reason. If she wasn't pregnant, I don't think the judge would have said you have to finish by today.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%. Obviously. That's the whole, that's the whole crux of the argument.
Obviously.
Yeah.
You didn't explicitly, spell it out.
But Diddy's team is also pissed off because they're like, we want as much time as we can have.
Her voice is low at times. The defense did tell her if it's too much, I can read them. But there were many times early on this morning where she read some of those explicit details where she is clearly excited about freak off and talks about entertaining other people in the bedroom.
And what has Diddy's demeanor been in this cross-examination as well?
There was a moment where Sean Combs was nodding in agreement when they brought up a message that he sent her where he said, one of my favorite times of the freak-offs is when we're able to make love after. And then she responds, that's the same for me. Now, what's interesting here is that does match what she told prosecutors or what she's been telling the jury all along, which is she did this and she said, but she really wanted to spend time with him after the fact. So he was shaking his head at this message where he's almost, I guess, agreeing that he did say, without him saying it, he enjoyed having the freak-offs and then having sex with her after the fact. And her saying, I agree with you. I love having sex with you after, too.
Okay, after seeing that, what do you think really set Diddy off? Was it the content of those messages or the fact they were exposed in public like that? Let me know in the comments. I'm reading and replying to every single one.
One thing that really stands out that she says is that at one point Diddy had a knife inside her mouth and then says, I'm going to give you a Glasgow smile, which is, slitting someone's cheeks. but he's warned against it by a member of his team, saying Diddy's associates would prefer it if she, referring to Ashley, looked normal. She also says that they said to her they could ship her off and sell her to anyone in the world and she'd never be seen again by her parents or loved ones. Now, Ashley did make a police report in 2018 at the time of the alleged incident, and the Contra Costa Sheriff's Department confirmed her report was thoroughly investigated and it was determined the claims were unfounded. Diddy's team said Mr. Combs was nowhere near Orinda, California on the day that she claimed she was assaulted. There's no evidence that Mr. Combs was ever even in the same room as the alleged victim. She's completely unbelievable and no sane person who views the evidence will credit her story.
The last freak off tape that just got sold on the dark net, which I know because I monitor, went for $500 million. It had multiple stars in it. Nicki Minaj, Rihanna, Chris Brown, Justin Bieber, Drake. It was a really interesting night in Calabasas, and he just sold that footage.
Nobody had to look at him for real. And the truth is nobody did. Everybody laughed and joked about him dancing like a idiot in all them goddamn videos, twirling around in circles. This a bit wild, So I'm just saying, they didn't know. And he wasn't telling them. They just know he got the budget. He go to LA, he talk to Clive, he come back with the bread. Apparently, he has this man's confidence. Yeah, I'm sure that man was very confident with his in his mouth.
We made love.
Who you made love with?
Diddy, Bow Wow, Busta Rhymes.
Everyone knew he was the devil. He's been the devil for 30 years. He has been covered and protected by not only Clive Davis, but Lucian Grange. He was selected to be the demon that he is, to keep the culture in line so the industry could continue for all of its precious jewels. We have too many lost. The list of lost is ridiculous, and everyone knows Diddy was selected for this job. He's the Judas.
New developments involving the case against Sean Diddy Combs, what he decided in court today, and what this now means, the move coming just 4 days before his trial is set to begin. Here's Aaron Katursky.
Tonight, Sean Combs makes it official. He's rejecting the government's offer to plead guilty and spare himself the possibility of a prolonged term in prison. When asked if he turned down the offer, Combs answered, "Yes, I do, Your Honor," as he stood in a baggy beige jail uniform. Terms were not disclosed, but prosecutors did say a plea could result in a shorter sentence for Combs than if he's convicted.
Well, Bill and Sade, accepting a plea agreement would mean that Sean Combs would have to admit to trafficking and force. And today he made it very clear that was not going to happen. Diddy maintained all along these encounters involved consenting adults and plans to take his chances that a jury agrees.
Ever felt aggrieved and targeted by the government? He feels an obligation to those people to say, you know what? Maybe I can break the model. Maybe I can show the world that a black man can win, in federal court. And I think he probably is the only person I know of who might be able to actually accomplish that.
Puffy invited me for weeks, asking me to come and teach him how to, wanted me to be his acting coach for a while. Go there and he's sitting around just looking. I'm like, okay, what's the material you want to work on? He's just looking at me. Then next thing you know, okay, hey, will you help me? I want to hear your music. So I come over there and I play the music. And he's sitting there just looking at me, like waiting. Okay. So then my assistant was like, he wants to hang out with you next week. And I was like, for what? He's like, I think he's trying to f*** you.
Elaborate, sometimes days-long parties by coercing victims through drugs, threats, and manipulation. They claim to have video evidence, and some of the accusations echo details from over 70 civil lawsuits filed against Combs over the last 30 years.
You guys weren't even 18 years old. You couldn't escape. You couldn't get out of there. There were so many times I tried to intervene. There was a lot of times.
This is going to be such a
massive trial, like maybe the biggest Hollywood trial. God knows which way it's going to go. Is it going to go on for weeks?
Oh, for sure, At trial, Combs will ditch the jail garb and wear ordinary clothes. As his lawyers argue, the evidence shows consenting adults being intimate in their own way.
Will you be open to a plea bargain?
Well, it's not up to me. It's up to Mr. Combs, and I don't see it happening. Why? Because he believes he's innocent. He believes he's innocent, and what's more, he believes that he needs to stand up, not just for himself, for his family, and for everybody who's been targeted by the federal government.
The decision guarantees Combs will face trial beginning just 4 days from now that will test whether one of music's most prolific figures used his power, wealth, and fame to exploit both women and men for decades.
No, the deck is stacked against him. They've got a ton of evidence. Take the plea deal, dude. Just take it.
Well, my guess is that, because we don't know the deal of the plea deal. At least I don't think we do.
True.
And I think he also feels an obligation to people in general. Maybe it's black people, maybe it's white people, maybe it's anybody who's...
Back up a little bit, please.
How can you support your father? How do you support him moving forward?
Do you still think that, because there is this public perception, that there are celebrity tapes involved in this case? No. Do you still think that there are minors involved in this case?
I'm certain no.
Okay.
And again, when you say this case, we're talking the criminal case.
The criminal case.
In the
correct.
criminal,
I know that.
in the criminal case, no.
There's an arrest coming. There's actually 2 arrests that are already made. There's a 3rd one coming. I don't know why people are sitting on this. I'm ready. I see that some people are not. I've been ready. A lot of you are ready. Like, let's get this over with, right?
Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs back behind bars. A magistrate judge denying him bail, saying that there were no conditions that she could conceive of that would make her confident that he would appear again for other court appearances. The judge saying, my concern is this is a crime that happens behind closed doors. He did, and when the judge did, Diddy, who was sitting at the defense table with his attorneys, did not show any signs of emotion. He took a sip of water before he was led out of the courtroom by the U.S. Marshals. Now, his lawyers have vowed to fight this. They are going to be back in court on Wednesday before the judge who will oversee this trial and try to get Diddy to be released.
The last hearing before Sean Combs' trial starts, when he walked into federal court today, he appeared to be looking for his family. They've pretty much been at all of the hearings that I've been to, but there was no presence of his sons or his mother or his sister who had previously been at those hearings.
Isn't that, to my mind, that's one of the bigger hurdles in selecting a jury this coming week, is that there is, at least anecdotally, when I talk to people, they have that opinion, strongly held opinion, that there's celebrity tapes, that they've kind of conflated Epstein, and you mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell and all of these things into Diddy. There's this idea that somehow that this is Epstein redux or something.
The biggest takeaway for me is that both sides expect to have all of this done in the matter of 3 days. Now, given just how high profile this trial is, I was kind of stunned that they seem very confident that they will be able to seat a jury in that amount of time.
What happens is if people go into a trial believing the firepower on the prosecution is so strong, I mean, let's say on a scale of 1 to 100, it's a 95 that it's so strong, but it goes down to an 88. That helps the defense, because everybody goes in thinking, wow, they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and all of a sudden, none of it's there. I think that actually helps the defense.
His lawyers had argued that he had made good faith efforts by showing up in New York, ready to surrender to face these charges, but prosecutors said that he could not be trusted, that he has a history of trying to intimidate witnesses, including some who are going to be witnesses in this case. They urge the judge to remand him.
No one expected day 6 of Diddy's trial to end in a meltdown. The morning started like every other. Slow, quiet tension, attorneys shuffling papers, reporters taking notes in the hallway. Cassie wasn't present in the courtroom, but her presence absolutely everywhere. And then it happened. The prosecution stood up, requested to enter new digital evidence into the record, and before Diddy's legal team could fully react, Judge allowed it. They began reading aloud Cassie's private messages, not emails, not statements, but raw, unfiltered text messages pulled from a recovered iCloud backup. And let me tell you, the mood in that courtroom shifted instantly. The messages weren't long, they weren't even detailed, but they were honest, and that's what made them devastating. Messages Cassie sent to close friends, her assistant, even a relative. Messages like, "I don't want to go tonight, but he'll flip if I say no. He thinks I'm ungrateful when I cry. I pretend it's normal, but I feel like I'm disappearing." You could hear the tension thicken the room as each one was read. No graphic details, no accusations. Just pure exhaustion, pure emotional captivity. And the jurors, you could see their faces change. Because this wasn't just testimony anymore. This was real-time pain. As the prosecutor read on, everyone in the room started shifting. But Diddy? He was boiling. First, it was clenched jaws, then the tapping fingers, then the glare toward his legal team, and finally, he snapped. He leaned over to his attorney and hissed something that couldn't be heard. But his body language said it all. Red face, jaw locked. He shook his head aggressively, mouthed something that looked like, "This is fucking insane," and slammed his hand against the desk. The judge paused. The jury stared, and in that moment, it didn't matter what the text said. Diddy looked unhinged, and it makes you wonder, do you think Diddy snapped because the messages were lies, or because he knew they were too real to spin? Drop your take in the comments. I'll be replying to all of them. Because this isn't just courtroom drama anymore. This is Diddy cracking under pressure. After the outburst, you could hear a pin drop. Even the court reporter's keys slowed down. Diddy's attorney immediately requested a recess, citing emotional strain and unfair prejudice. But it was too late. The jury had already seen the man behind the glasses. Not the mogul, not the icon. The man Cassie's messages warned them about. And the press? They were already tweeting about Diddy's breakdown before the gavel even hit. What hit the hardest? Cassie didn't even have to be there. She didn't need to cry on the stand or drop bombshell quotes. Her words from years ago did the work for her. She wasn't testifying. She was remembering. And those memories, they painted the most haunting portrait of all, because these weren't accusations. They were quiet admissions of survival, and if Diddy thought he could control the story, those messages proved the truth was already louder than him. Once the courtroom settled from Diddy's outburst, the weight of the messages truly began to sink in. These weren't graphic bombshells with shocking descriptions. They were something worse, subtle, consistent, exhausted. The prosecution didn't need to exaggerate. They didn't need to sensationalize. They just read, and every sentence landed like a quiet scream, because these weren't Cassie performing for court. These were the kind of messages women send at 2 a.m. when they can't breathe, but still don't want to cause a scene. And for the jury, it wasn't about what happened, it was about how long she endured it. Almost immediately, Diddy's lawyers went on offense. They filed a motion to strike the messages from the record, arguing that they lacked full context, were emotionally prejudicial, and could bias the jury unfairly. The judge denied the motion. That denial was a body blow to Diddy's entire strategy, which had, up until that point, been focused on controlling the narrative. They wanted Cassie's words in a courtroom setting where they could pick them apart. But these texts, they weren't for the court. They were for herself, and that made them untouchable. Courtroom insiders began reporting a noticeable change in the jury. Before the texts, they were polite, neutral, alert. After, you could see the emotions start creeping in. One woman on the panel reportedly wiped her eyes twice. Another kept staring down every time a new text was read. A third leaned forward, visibly shaken. The prosecution didn't say it out loud, but everyone could feel it. These weren't just exhibits. These were Cassie's diary pages. And now that they were out, there was no one reading them. Which brings me to you. If you were on that jury, would those messages feel like a red flag or a turning point? Would they be enough to sway your verdict? Tell me in the comments. I'm reading and replying to all of you because this trial is testing more than the law. It's testing our instinct to believe women when the tears stop and the texts begin. Here's the brutal truth Diddy's team is now facing. You can't cross-examine a text message sent in private pain. You can't accuse it of lying. You can't twist its tone with a leading question. That's what made this moment so devastating. Cassie wasn't on the stand, but she might have done more damage from the shadows than she ever could face to face, because these texts weren't curated. They weren't polished. They were real, and in a courtroom full of billion-dollar lawyers, flashy suits, and a man who built his empire on controlling the narrative, Truth just became the most dangerous person in the room. The case against Diddy was already serious. Cassie's original testimony had laid the groundwork, but now it's personal, it's intimate, it's undeniable. Because this isn't just about physical abuse or control, it's about emotional captivity. And if those messages proved anything, it's that Diddy wasn't just accused of hurting Cassie. He's accused of slowly erasing her while smiling for cameras and posting red carpet selfies. And that truth is 1,000 times harder to bury. The courtroom saw the beginning of it. The jaw clenching, the hand slam, the whispered curses. But what happened after the cameras cut? That's where the real story lives. Multiple insiders have now confirmed that Diddy had a full emotional breakdown. In a private side room after Cassie's texts were read, he reportedly slammed a chair against the wall, yelled at his attorneys, said things like, "They said they wouldn't bring that up. This is character assassination. She's just bitter. This ain't fair." Witnesses said he was red-faced, pacing like a caged animal, and had to be calmed down by 2 court officers before returning to his seat. So when people say Diddy lost it, they're not exaggerating. He didn't just lose composure, he lost control of his narrative. Before the texts, Diddy's legal team had a rhythm. They downplayed, reframed, gaslit. But now, they're panicking. Their latest move? Leaking vague stories to the press about how Cassie's texts were misleading and taken out of emotional context. They even hinted that Cassie may have fabricated emotional distress to gain sympathy. But the public isn't buying it, because you can spin headlines. You can coach testimony, but you can't fake a text message that says, "I feel scared and empty, but I keep smiling because he likes when I smile." No amount of courtroom polish can clean that up. Court analysts are now calling Diddy's outburst the moment the tide shifted. Why? Because juries aren't just listening to testimony. They're watching everything, and that includes the defendant. And Diddy's behavior when the texts were read didn't scream innocence. It screamed someone who just got caught hearing the truth out loud for the first time. Even former federal prosecutors are saying it. That kind of reaction, it doesn't help you. Which brings me to you. Do you think Diddy's breakdown was genuine? Emotion? Or was it the panic of someone who thought Cassie would never speak this clearly? Let me know in the comments. I'm responding to everyone, because this is where reputation ends and reality begins. And every reaction is now a piece of evidence. Sources close to the case are reporting what insiders feared. Diddy's own camp is splintering. One key team member, described as part of his inner logistics circle, has reportedly ghosted since day 6. Another assistant refused to comment to press after leaving court early. And according to leaks from inside the defense's prep team, Diddy has now become erratic and combative behind closed doors, refusing advice, lashing out during strategy sessions, and demanding his team fix the optics. The optics are already broken because no one's talking about his image anymore. They're talking about whether or not he'll take the stand or take a deal. There's something poetic in all this. Cassie never screamed, never cursed, never tried to sensationalize. She simply let her own words, written during the darkest moments of her life, speak for themselves. And in doing that, she didn't just shake the courtroom. She shattered the version of Diddy the world had been sold for years. The suave mogul, the untouchable kingmaker, the man with all the power. Now, he's just another powerful man unraveling under the weight of a woman's truth. At first, everyone assumed Cassie's private texts were something the prosecution stumbled on by accident. But now, we know better. According to court documents filed under seal, the messages were recovered from a subpoenaed iCloud backup, with permission from Cassie herself. Which means she gave them access, willingly. Not just to prove she lived through what she claimed, but to show that even in private, she wasn't safe. The defense tried to argue that these messages were cherry-picked, but they backfired. Because every message read in court matched the timeline Cassie had already testified to. She didn't just tell her story, she backed it up. With her receipts, some of the most heartbreaking parts of those texts weren't just what Cassie wrote, it's who she wrote to. A few messages were to friends who responded with things like, "Just breathe. Try to keep him calm tonight. I can't lose. You. Just play nice until it blows over." Now ask yourself, why were her friends giving survival advice instead of telling her to run? Because even they knew leaving him wasn't safe. And that's what the prosecution is using now to expand the scope of this case. They're not just painting Diddy as a predator, they're building a story about a culture of silence. And whether intentional or not, Cassie's own circle may have been part of it. Every day in court now feels like a reveal party from hell. It started with whispers, then came rumors, then came Cassie's testimony. Now, texts, receipts, timelines, and names. Suddenly, assistants who didn't know anything are showing up in message logs. Security staff who weren't involved are showing up in timestamps. The background characters of this story are becoming witnesses, whether they like it or not. And you have to ask, do you think the people around Diddy stayed quiet because they were afraid, or because silence was part of the paycheck drop? Your answer in the comments? I'm replying to every single one, because at this point, everyone's silence is starting to sound like a guilty echo. Here's what legal analysts are saying right now, and it's chilling. This jury isn't just watching a man go on trial, they're watching an entire machine unravel. Cassie's texts exposed more than abuse. They exposed coordination, control, a lifestyle that depended on everyone staying in line, looking away, and pretending it was all glamorous. The parties, the luxury, the fake smiles, and under it all, a woman who kept whispering into her phone at 3 a.m. because she had no other way to be heard. Now, the jury has heard her, and their faces are saying more with each passing day. This is no longer just Diddy versus Cassie. This is about the circle, the people who held the secrets, the enablers, the fixers, the ones who nodded, escorted, smiled for photos, and stayed silent. But Cassie's texts, they're doing what she couldn't do back then. They're making noise. And as more messages get reviewed and more names start getting tied to specific events, this trial isn't winding down. It's just heating up. For years, Diddy surrounded himself with loyalists, assistants, producers, security, artists, people who owed him, people who feared him, people who would never speak until now. Because in the wake of Cassie's texts going public, and Diddy's courtroom breakdown exposing just how fragile his grip really is, that wall of silence, it's starting to collapse. Multiple sources close to the case have confirmed it. One longtime member of Diddy's team is now cooperating with prosecutors. We don't know the name. We don't know what they've shared yet, but we know this. It came after Cassie's messages were read in court, and that alone says everything. According to court reporters and verified leaks, someone in Diddy's camp, described as a senior operations figure, was overheard saying, "I'm not going down for this. I did what I was told." That phrase has now been entered into a private hearing transcript. And if that team member truly flips on Diddy, giving investigators insight into how Cassie's travel, surveillance, and alleged manipulation were coordinated, this isn't just testimony anymore. It's a conspiracy case. And that's when rich men stop looking powerful and start looking prosecutable. Here's the twist prosecutors are now pushing. They don't just want to convict Diddy, they want to map the whole system. Who booked the rooms? Who made the calls? Who enforced the silence? And if this insider, this fixer, as some are calling them, can give up even one piece of that puzzle, it validates everything Cassie said. And it proves that abuse doesn't just come from bruises. It comes from the networks that make abuse sustainable. And here's where I ask you, do you think someone from Diddy's own team flipping now makes them brave, or just a coward trying to save themselves? Let me know in the comments. I'm reading and replying to everyone, because these are the moments where justice hinges on people doing the right thing, even if it's way too late. This trial was already headed toward infamy, but Cassie's private texts didn't just earn sympathy, they broke the illusion. They reminded the world that behind every celebrity scandal is a human voice begging to be heard. And it worked, because the moment her words hit the record, things started shifting. Diddy snapped, the jury leaned in, his defense scrambled, and his own people started disappearing. Now, his legal team is scrambling to stop the bleeding before someone else flips. But when fear starts to outweigh loyalty, there's no team in the world that can protect you. Cassie hasn't spoken in days. She hasn't returned to court. No interviews, no press, no theatrics, and still, she owns the room. Because her truth was never about the cameras. It was always in those messages, the quiet ones, the scared ones, the ones sent when she thought no one would ever believe her. And now, they've become the most powerful weapon in this entire trial. She didn't have to yell. She didn't have to fight. She just had to survive long enough to be heard. And now, everyone's listening. So here's my final question to you. Do you think this is the moment Diddy finally loses everything? Or is there still more hiding in the shadows we haven't seen yet? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm replying. To every one of you, like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell, because this trial is still unraveling, And the next name to flip might be the one that brings the whole empire down.